Welcome. Today we're going to be going and building this awesome table saw crosscut sled with hold downs to keep your project in line and also with stop blocks to keep everything where it needs to be. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to subscribe by hitting the button right down here and hit that bell icon if you would, so that way you get all of our newest videos when they come out. And of course, don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you like it. Or if you don't, well, I guess you could do the other thing, but nobody does that. So anyway, let's go ahead and get on to the project. Alright, these are going to be your miter bars. You need to get these cut first. These will be for the bottom of the sled. Just make sure that they're nice and snug. They're going to be a different size for every table saw. Now we're going to go ahead and cut the first piece for the back part of the sled. And we're just going to go ahead and strike a line on the plywood again and cut the second part for the back part of the sled. After you're done with that, just make sure that all the pieces are nice and squared up and are the exact same size. And if you want, you can put the prettiest part inside and out. Now we're going to go ahead and strike a line on a rail so we know where to cut. Because the rail is going to be on top, so we're just going to go ahead and cut off that piece here. And then on the second piece that we cut, we're going to go ahead and router out the little overhang that the rail has. Your rails might be a little different than this, so you might not need to do this. The ones we have are from Rockler, and they're a little wider than 3/4 of an inch. Just drop that on and make sure that it's all squared up, and if it's looking good, go ahead and move on to setting your rail on top and making sure that everything's a good flat surface like this. Now we're just going to glue the death out of these two boards. If you ever decide to make a cutting board, this is kind of the same basic principle. Glue, glue, glue like crazy. We're going to go ahead and put the two pieces together and make sure that they're aligned perfectly. And once we're done with this, we're going to go ahead and clamp this thing like crazy. It's really true what they say, you never can have enough clamps. Now we're going to use our fence to make sure that our board is nice and straight. Using the pennies, we're going to go ahead and put those inside the miter slots, just like this. You'll need 4 of those. Then we're going to check to make sure that the wood is level with the table saw itself. Since it is, we're going to go ahead and glue these up. And then we're just going to go ahead and put our table for our sled right on top of them and let it sit for about 5 minutes. Now that 5 minutes has passed, we're going to go ahead and pick it up. It's not totally dry, but it's close enough that we can move it. And start getting ready to drill our holes. You don't have to be super specific on this like I was. It's just kind of a nice thing to do to make sure everything's nice and in line. Then we're going to countersink the holes so that way the screw heads don't sit on top of the miter bars. And then just screw in the screws. And you're done with that part. Now we're going to go ahead and use our router and route out the channel for our rails that we'll be putting our hold downs in later. I'm just going to go all the way from front to back on this when we get done. And then test to make sure that the rail fits. It looks like we got a nice good fit there. And we're just going to go ahead and put the screws in our cut down rail. You just cut that down on the table saw, no big deal, it's just aluminum. Then we're just going to go ahead and put our hold down clamps in. Just make sure that everything's sliding correctly and fitting correctly. I'll need to take these off before the last part. And then we're just going to put a little chamfer on the inside edge of the back of the sled. This will allow dust not to collect in any specific area. We're going to put in a little wedge to make sure we're leveled out. And then we're going to double and triple check our measurements on this to make sure everything is perfectly aligned. We don't want any light coming in behind or whatever you're using to measure with. In this case, we use some carpenter squares. And we'll use that same thing to draw some lines in the dead center of where we're going to be putting the back piece. This is so we know where to align our screws to. And then we're just going to go ahead and drill our hole, which will also countersink our hole. So that way, again, our screws are not protruding through the bottom. Then after clamping everything down, we're just going to go ahead and screw the screw right in, and we're good to go. Do that probably about 7 or 8 more times. Now we're going to go ahead and make the finger safety device. I have a lovely assistant here, aka the wife, is making this. Just glue that up out of a bunch of 3/4 inch boards. Some scraps that we had sitting around. And then just clamp the death out of that and let it sit overnight. And to show you how many clamps you should be using, here's a little demonstration. Now we're going to go ahead and do the back board, or the front board as some people call it. This is basically just an extra piece on there to keep things from sliding forward. You don't technically have to have this, but it does make the sled a lot more rigid. And just glue those together, and again, tons of clamps. And just let that dry overnight. Take off the clamps, and we're pretty much good to go. I'm just going to take this over to the table sled and cut off the excess glue and anything that might have made it uneven. That way we have a nice flat surface to work with. Again, not really totally necessary, as nothing actually is going to be relying on this being straight, but you know, do it right the first time. Make it look nice. Just going to level that out there a little bit to make sure it looks good. Clamp it down. We're going to go ahead and flip that over real quick. And then pretty much the same thing we did on the back of the sled. We're just going to go ahead and drill in and countersink the screw holes. And now we're just going to go ahead and start cutting our first little cut into the sled, so that way we can get a good entry point, and then just kind of slide it back and forth. This is, as you can see, a very dusty operation. When you're cutting this, you want to cut all the way through. You don't want it catching when you're actually doing an actual cut. Now we're just going to raise the blade and just finish cutting all the way through here. We're going to do the same thing on the back side as well. Then we're just going to install our little finger saver. 4 screws should do it. Then we're just going to go ahead and throw some wax on here so that way it slides nice and smooth. And then just buff that out so that way it doesn't stay sticky or anything. We hope you enjoyed our video over the table saw crosscut sled. We had a lot of fun building this, and as you can see, it's a very, very functional piece of equipment. Everything from the hold downs to keep your project in place, to the stop blocks to make sure that everything stays exactly where you need it when you're making a cut. And that is obviously really huge when we're trying to make those perfect cuts. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down here and hit that bell notification icon so you can pick up all of our newest videos as they come out. In the meantime, thanks again for watching and have a good one.